MIAA Monday, MIAA Commissioner Mike Racy joining me once again, and we've talked about the last 2 weeks, the NIL, name, image, likeness for student athletes. NCAA making a decision this past week. A lot to interpret, I guess, as what the NCAA is allowing student athletes, allowing schools, conferences to do now. And, sir, first off, thanks for coming back on again. But there's a lot to figure out here, too, isn't it, as we kind of move forward now with the name, image, likeness out in the open like this.
Yeah, Chris, good to see you again, and happy 4th of July, Independence Day weekend to everyone out there in MIAA land. But it's college sports is changing rapidly. A lot going on, and a big announcement by the NCAA this past Wednesday as it relates to name, image, likeness. The NCAA was really working with a July 1st deadline. That's when a lot of the state laws that have been written regarding name, image, likeness, or NIL is what people are referring that to. July 1 was when a few of those state laws were set to go in place. The federal government had not taken action as the NCAA had hoped to create a uniform rule or uniform law that would apply to every student athlete, every division, no matter what state you live in. The federal government has not done that. They still might, but they didn't meet that July 1 deadline. So June 30th, last Wednesday, the NCAA had to come out and they put in an interim policy. And it basically said that all of the restrictions that the NCAA has in its NCAA Division I, Division II, and Division III manuals, where the rules and regulations are kept, all of those rules and restrictions that apply to name, image, likeness for any student athlete, all of those are suspended and no longer will be enforced effective July 1st. And that allowed students, Chris, in states where either the state has not adopted name, image, likeness laws, or in states where there's a delayed effective date, maybe next summer or 2023, the NCAA's interim policy allows student athletes now in every state, every NCAA school, to know that those restrictions are suspended. They're not in place. And so if a student, no matter where they're located, if they start their own business or have an opportunity to profit off of their image or their likeness, do an endorsement or an autograph session, they can do that without fear that it's going to cost them their NCAA eligibility.
As this Pandora's box, if you will, kind of gets opened up as we start looking at everything, like you said, with this interim ruling by the NCAA, because with so many states at so many different levels of where they're at with the laws they're putting in, how much does this alleviate things for student athletes not to be wondering, okay, what's the law in Missouri? What's the law in Kansas, Oklahoma, and Nebraska, especially for the MIAA schools? How much does that, like you said, give them that room to kind of, I guess, explore their options they have?
Yeah, I think for student athletes, I think that, there's a sense of relief. And I think our student athletes recognize that it's a new day in college sports, and they can if they built up a pretty large social media following on TikTok or Instagram for whatever reason, maybe they're a good singer, maybe they have special skills in repairing cars or do-it-yourself projects, whatever our student athletes may have done. They can now profit from that. They can turn their 500,000 TikTok followers into a endorsement deal with some company and profit from that. And I think student athletes haven't really got too caught up on what state do I live in, and what are those state laws? That is where our schools are concerned. Our schools are looking at this from a compliance standpoint. They obviously want to provide opportunities for our student athletes in the MIAA, but they need to comply with what the NCAA has said. They need to comply with the laws that have been adopted in certain states, and they need to comply with what the MIAA is saying. And so our schools are really focused on this from an education and a compliance standpoint, and then also secondarily what they can do to help our student athletes be successful. Chris, in the states where we have institutions, we've got 2 states that have passed NIL laws, and the governor of those states has signed those into law. That's Nebraska and Oklahoma. And both of those states say that all of the requirements that are put in place for schools and student athletes in Oklahoma and Nebraska must be in effect by no later than July 2023. But schools in those states have an opportunity to accelerate that and follow all of that earlier. In Missouri, the schools in Missouri, the state has passed a bill through both the House and the Senate, and it's on Governor Parsons' desk, waiting for his signature. And I think he was waiting to see what the NCAA was going to do, and we'll see if he signs that. In the state of Kansas, they have a bill that's still kind of working its way through committee, and so they don't have anything yet for the governor to sign. So we're in a lot of different stages of legislation and rulemaking in the 4 states where we have MIAA schools, and the laws are a little different. For instance, the law in Missouri requires, as part of that law, that there be financial literacy or financial education provided for every student athlete at every school in Missouri that's offering intercollegiate athletics. So they have a very specific educational requirement that schools are going to need to meet once the governor signs off on that. So it's fairly confusing for schools to figure out, okay, what's in place, what do we need to follow, where are those lines? For our student athletes, I think it's pretty simple. They now know that they can go out and monetize their name or their image or their likeness, and with just a couple of exceptions, they can do that without jeopardizing their NCAA eligibility.
That was the next thing I was going to kind of ask you about, was the eligibility factor, because I'm sure as we kind of get deeper into this, we'll see probably student athletes, some across the country, either find themselves without knowing it in some type of area where it's an illegal type of deal or whatever the NCAA comes up with it. I guess a hypothetical one would be if it's a local car dealership or something, but there's a booster that's working there or has ownership in it. Does that make it eligibility issue if it's a booster of a school that's at that car dealership that's giving that whatever it is to the student athlete at that point?
Well, and that's one of those questions that generates an answer that is maybe. it could, and that's why a lot of what we have to do as a conference is help our schools from an education standpoint, educate their student athletes, educate parents, educate boosters and alumni, what can be done and what can't be done. we've come up with kind of 4 or 5 main points, Chris, that we've shared with our members on kind of where the line seems to be, and what schools at this point need to be mindful of. The first is we have our absolute first bullet is that all MIAA student athletes are expected to follow all applicable state, local law, executive orders in the state by a governor or another official, state university policy systems, NCAA guidance, and then ultimately federal law, hopefully, on this issue. So, there's a burden on student athletes to make sure that they are aware of what these restrictions are, and that that they're being mindful of really what they can and can't do. For instance, an international student athlete puts his or her visa at risk by receiving any kind of compensation that was not part of their original application and the reason that they're coming as an international student to the United States to study. So, there's some tricky legal issues that could even require some help from an immigration attorney that an international student would need to consider in this space. But that's number one. The burden on our student athletes to really be mindful and aware of all of these current laws. Number two, unless restricted by law, we're saying that all MIAA student athletes must disclose to the MIAA institution any compensation and contracts that they're now getting, that they now have access to. So that's a key for us, is that this transparency occur that allows our schools to know what our student athletes are doing and what they're receiving. There are a couple of states, not any in the MIAA footprint, that prohibit that type of transparency. In the MIAA, the states that have adopted laws, that's silent, or specified that it should happen, that this documentation of compensation and contracts need to occur. The third area is a recognition now by the NCAA that our student athletes can receive professional services as it relates to these name, image, likeness opportunities. So while a student athlete can't have an agent to help them as it relates to their professional sport career, they have to wait until they've exhausted eligibility to have that kind of a relationship with an agent. While they are eligible, they could have an agent or some third party helping them with a name, image, likeness contract. So that's something that's new that our student athletes will need to be aware of. Bullet 4 is we're very clear that any of this compensation student athletes receive, it cannot be for their athletic performance. It cannot be for athletic achievement, and it cannot be an inducement for that student athlete to attend that university. So what we would know is kind of pay for play. That cannot be part of this deal. So a booster can't say to the volleyball player, hey, you had a great game last Friday. I was there. Here's $1,000 because you killed it. That can't happen. That booster can say, hey, I want you to come to work for me because you're really popular with kids 16 to 21 years old. You're one of their favorites. You've got this big social media following, and I want to be able to take advantage of that. Have you at my dealership every Saturday doing autographs, and we'll promote it together, and we'll hopefully see a lot of these younger people in looking for a new or a used car. That can happen. So that distinction needs to be in place. And then the final piece, Chris, is that we were very clear that none of this compensation now that our athletes have an opportunity to receive can be for services that don't actually occur. It actually you actually have to get paid for work that's actually done. And that relates again back to this pay for play. But athletes are prohibited from accepting compensation for work not actually performed. So we've outlined kind of these 5 guiding principles for our MIAA member schools. We've encouraged them to adopt their own NIL policy. Every school needs to have a name, image, likeness policy in the MIAA that clarifies things like whether or not a student athlete would be able to use the institution's logo in something that they're endorsing or promoting. Could a student athlete use the institution's athletic facility? If a student athlete, a great tennis player at one of our MIAA schools wants to start his or her own, Julie Smith tennis camp, could they do that on our campus? Would a school permit a student athlete to use their athletic facility at the going rate of rental to stage that type of a camp? So there are a lot of things that institutions need to think through as it relates to their name, image, likeness policy, and they need to be mindful of kind of these 5 guiding principles that we've outlined.
On that level, I guess when you start looking at, because I've seen some of the Division Ones already come out, so you can't use our colors, you can't use our logo.
Right.
But if there's a Division II or an MIAA school that says you can do all that, but the other ones say you can't, does that almost maybe give a competitive unbalance to the school that's saying, yeah, you can use our logo, you can use our colors? Or that's something where the MIAA may say, hey, we want you guys to be as even field as possible. That way, school A isn't saying, yeah, use our logo, use our colors. School B says, no, we don't want you to do that. I mean, is that maybe a situation you guys have to look at?
Yeah, and I think that's where we're heading. And this goes back to something that we talked about last week, Chris, and that was the impact of the Alston Supreme Court case that came out, where it was written as related to a factual pattern or a set of facts, very specific to educational benefits that a school could give a student athlete, and whether the NCAA or a group of conferences could restrict that. And I think the Alston case, a 9-0 decision that basically said the NCAA cannot restrict educational benefits, and a 9-0 opinion, that was pretty clear on that type of restriction being illegal and impermissible restraint of trade, violation of antitrust law. It really predicted what we saw last Wednesday from the NCAA in just a very limited policy, that said, student athlete restrictions on name, image, likeness have been suspended, and really everything is fair game per state law, except you can't get paid to play and you can't get paid as part of a recruiting inducement. That's where the Supreme Court case really, I think, has impacted name, image, likeness. What the Supreme Court did say, though, is that a conference as a single entity does not have enough impact on a market to really, especially the MIAA. We don't impact the market in a way where we would do something and student athletes wouldn't have other reasonable choices of where they would decide to go to school. So as a conference, it's really now fallen to us, collectively, our member schools deciding, okay, do we want to put some restrictions in place of whether a student athlete could use a school logo or use a school's facilities or other other things that we're going to have to answer. And we could adopt some MIAA policies that govern name, image, likeness, just to try to create this equal footing, level playing field for our member schools. So those are some of the discussions that we're starting to have now, is how does the conference, how does the MIAA support what our schools are now able to do for student athletes from an education standpoint, from opening up resources, and now what our student athletes obviously are able to take advantage of in monetizing their name, image, likeness. At the end of the day, Chris, our goal, our collective goal as an association in the MIAA is to be the place that student athletes at the Division II level know provides them the greatest chance to be successful with their name, image, likeness. The greatest place collectively are schools for students to develop their brand and find ways to monetize it. We're going to get there. Really, the only way we're going to get there as an association is for the MIAA to be, committed to shared education. We're all using the same resources in how we educate our students, our boosters, our fans. A commitment to compliance. That we're all going to do this the right way. We're not going to cut any corners or take any shortcuts. And then the third piece is that we need to allow our schools to figure out ways that they can tap into what I think are some of the best university resources and community resources to help our students be successful. And, there's going to be a lot of creativity, I think, on MIAA campuses on how they help students understand about contracts and limited liability corporations and insurance and legal risks of starting a business and tax issues and, all of the things that our student athletes are going to need to be mindful of. Hopefully at the end of the day, student athletes from across the country are going to know that, hey, the place to be successful, to go and have those opportunities, is going to an MIAA school.
Along those lines, I think it's fair to say that a lot of the MIAA, schools get student athletes that are probably, fringe Division I FCS, talent too. Is there almost a competition in the sense of what the FCS level Division I's doing? Because the league, the conference gets a lot of student athletes that arguably could be playing at the Division I level too, and you're not just competing against Division II conferences at this point with NIL, but maybe you're competing with Division I conferences too.
There's no doubt. During the recruiting process, in almost probably every sport, track, baseball, volleyball, football for sure, basketball. We've got student athletes that are weighing opportunities at the FCS level and the opportunity to come and compete in the MIAA, and they're trying to make that decision. And that's happening for students when they're being recruited out of high school. It also becomes a reality in the world of transfer students. And, we get a lot of student athletes, Chris, that try to make it at the D1 level, the highest levels of Division I. And they get homesick. They're disappointed in their playing time. They want to be someplace where they can compete for a national title. They want to come back closer to home and play with kids that they played against in high school and friends. A lot of reasons why students transfer, but we get a lot of kids that are playing FBS and FCS and a number of sports, and the MIAA is ultimately where they decide that they'll be most successful. So we have to be prepared as a conference, to offer those same opportunities, whether it's in facilities, whether it's in the standard and level of coaching, whether it's the type of fan passion and support that they see, and now the opportunities that they would have in the world of name, image, likeness, and being able to take advantage of some things that they want to do from a branding or a business standpoint.
MIAA Commissioner Mike Racy, I'll get you out of here on this question, and we're already pretty deep into the woods at this point in this conversation a little bit, trying to weed through everything. But just where we're at this point, I guess, where states are trying to figure out their laws, the federal levels, NCAA is waiting on them, maybe the federal levels wait on the NCAA, conferences are waiting. Where are we in all this? I guess as we look forward, move ahead now, just where is maybe college athletics at, just with the NIL going on? And I guess we could probably throw transfer stuff in there too. Just kind of, there's a lot hitting college athletics at the same time.
Yeah, well, I think it depends on who you ask. I think a lot of people, feel like this is a big mess, and a lot of unknown, and I understand that it's a challenging time for intercollegiate athletics. We've never seen as much change as we've seen the last few months for what being a college athlete, a college student athlete means, and some of that is still unwritten. Some of that is still to be determined. Some of that is still being debated in Washington D.C. and in Senate and House committees about whether or not student athletes should be permitted to organize, and whether they should be able to create a union, and whether they should receive pay for play. And so there's a lot going on. I like to think of it as a great opportunity for our schools in the MIAA and for the MIAA as a conference. This is the moment in time, when we need to figure out a way to work through all of these challenges, do it together as a league. And at the end of the day, like I said, be the place that student athletes, when they're thinking about where they want to go to school in Division II, that this is the place they know that will give them the best opportunity to be successful. And successful as a student, successful as a well-rounded, balanced person, prepared for whatever's next in life after graduation, successful as a highly skilled athlete, competing in great facilities, getting great training, getting great coaching, and now successful maybe as an entrepreneur, or as an independent business person that already has some great ideas and maybe a pretty big following, but wants to sharpen their skills through campus resources or community resources to figure out a way to kind of monetize whatever it is that they've come up with. So, we've got to turn these challenges into opportunities for our MIAA schools that our coaches can go out and brag about, and tell that story when they're recruiting. And I'm confident, Chris, that our schools will be up to that challenge.
It's funny, when we started this podcast 3 weeks ago, we were like, hopefully we find a bunch of topics to talk about all summer before we get back into the fall. I don't think we're having any issues at this point. We've been on one topic basically all 3 weeks, and it keeps expanding just because, like we said, there's just so much going on, and it's probably not going to clear up very quickly. I guess it's going to keep going, and we're going to keep building off this more than anything else.
Think so. I think, this is the new day. This is the new NCAA. And, I hope our fans of MIAA schools will embrace this change. I think that they'll continue to see great student athlete performances. I think they'll be confident that, these young people are on our campuses. Most of them having to pay for school. They're not getting a full ride. They're there on a partial scholarship, and hopefully they'll appreciate that what some of these students are going to now have an opportunity to do will help them pay for college. Will help them, instead of taking out a loan for the rest of their tuition and books. They're going to be able to help pay for that on their own, and I think it's an exciting time. I think it's a great time to be a student athlete, and I hope our fans continue to believe it's a great time to be an MIAA fan as well.
All right, I have one more question for you before I let you get out of here. You talk about that part of it, the MIAA fans supporting the student athletes, and this is a very polarizing topic. It has been with NIL, pay for play, everything else. Just what is the league, like you said, kind of maybe doing to keep the fan base not saying, well, they're just getting paid to be here now? Like you said, there's a lot of student athletes that aren't getting full ride scholarships. They're partial, they're walk-on, especially Division II level. Yeah. It's not what it is at Division I level where the money is, astronomically more, but it's not pay for play or stuff like that in the MIAA Division II level.
Right, and we just have to continue through our resources and platforms that we have in the MIAA, our social media accounts, the way we stage our championships. What we talk about as a conference office, we're just going to need to remind our fans that, hey, the balanced experience that we talk about in Division II, that isn't changing. Some of these new opportunities that our student athletes have, it's not going to really change the type of student athlete that they're seeing on our Division II campuses. It's just going to open up new opportunities for current students and future students. And frankly, a lot of these opportunities exist for every other student on campus. It's just that for a long time, the NCAA has held back and restricted these opportunities out of a belief that somehow it will create a negative light on a student's amateur standing. And we saw the Olympics go through this, Chris, a couple of decades ago. When they began to open up opportunities for their athletes to earn some compensation while training and competing to be an Olympian. And I don't think it's changed the public's appreciation for our Olympic athletes and the dedication and the commitment they go through. And I'm confident that Division II, and in particular MIAA fans, are still going to feel the same way about their MIAA student athletes, that these are truly students, that they're prioritizing what they need to get a degree. Graduation is the ultimate goal, that these are very talented athletes that compete at the highest level and will compete for national championships. And all that has happened is really opening up or relaxing some of these restrictions to give them a chance to profit and make some money off of some things that relate to their name or their image or some likeness or social media account, to build off of that publicity that they've helped create and help them earn some money for it.
MIAA Commissioner Mike Racy, thanks for coming on again this week, and I'm sure we'll have something else from NIL jump up at us next week too. That's just how we've been going the last 3 weeks. It's going to carry on. Yeah,
it's going to be a topic of conversation for the next few weeks. We'll try and keep it informative and interesting for all of our MIAA fans that are tuning in. But again, Chris, appreciate your time and letting us talk about these important issues and helping us get some information out there that's not just important to our schools, but the fans of the MIAA.
Absolutely. No problem. Happy to do it. Thank you, sir.
Good to see you.